So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah!
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, a couple days ago, we talked about a particular rumor floating around Detroit involving the Washington Commanders and our starting signal caller in Jared Goff. Now, it's no secret that the Washington Commanders have been in the market to trade for a starting veteran to quarterback in the NFL for next season, and there's been no secret that the Washington Commanders have been looking to shoot high and give up a lot of draft capital for a guy they believe can take them to the Super Bowl as early as the 2022 NFL season. And of course, with that being the case, the first thought that they had was to call for Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff has been a really solid NFL quarterback throughout his career. And today, we're going to talk about the possibility and the scenario of this rumor coming true, of the Washington Commanders being desperate enough or being needy enough to trade for Jared Goff, talk about what the trade value would be, talk about the logistics of the trade, whether it would work out for both sides, and what proper value would be for both sides, so both sides get an even trade where they feel like they are the winners. So starting off today, we're going to talk about Jared Goff as a quarterback, talk about his strengths and weaknesses, talk about what he did well, and talk about why the Washington Commanders, out of all the available quarterbacks in the NFL, called the Lions about Jared Goff. Now, Jared Goff did start the season incredibly poorly, but when looking at just the second half of his season, looking at the last 7 games that he played, knowing that he only played 14 games in 2021, you take a look at those last 7 games, and he actually had a really good stat line, throwing for over 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, and having a 3-1 record, having the Detroit Lions of all teams, the team that started 0-10, at a 500 record in his last 7 games. Jared Goff has shown that he can play at a high level, that he can take a team to a Super Bowl, and last season he showed that he can elevate a football team as poor as the Detroit Lions are talent-wise on paper, and elevate them to wins over the 10-win Cardinals, who have everything to lose, elevate them to wins over the number 1 seeded Green Bay Packers, and lead them to wins over borderline playoff teams like the Minnesota Vikings, and if he was playing, would have led us and lead us to at least a tie versus, again, a playoff contender in the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Jared Goff has shown that, yes, you do need at least some kind of supporting cast around him, but as long as you have anybody there, Jared Goff can make it work with the right coaches and the right system. You know, early in the season, Jared Goff didn't play well. His stats looked really poor because our offensive coordinator and our offensive play calling were so poor. But as soon as Ben Johnson took over, as soon as Dan Campbell took over and had more control over the offense, Jared Goff looked really good. And again, it's not like a 2 to 3 game sample size. It's half of a season. It's 7 football games where Jared Goff threw for 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, and just 2 interceptions. And in that time span, actually only had 3 turnovers in its entirety, as he did have 1 fumble on top of that, but having 3 times more scores than turnovers in the latter half of the season, and having a 500 record in the second half of the year is not anything to scoff at, and it's not anything to hold against Jared Goff, especially knowing we probably have the shallowest and least talented wide receiver core in the NFL, knowing that DeAndre Swift missed in multiple games, knowing that Frank Ragnow, the best center in the NFL, was out for a majority of the season, knowing that our offensive line was a constant rotating door at guards and tackles throughout the season, and knowing that there's just a lot of inconsistencies with who's healthy and who's playing each and every Sunday, and having to go on an injured reserve list and a coach COVID reserve list multiple weeks in the NFL season, and all of those coming in the second half of the season, by the way, Jared Goff's statistics start looking pretty good if you're the Washington Commanders looking for a guy that can not only, play some good football, but can also win you some football games. Jared Goff can do that, and as silly as it might sound to say, okay, the Washington Commanders are going to give up a first-round pick, they're going to give up all this draft capital for Jared Goff, I think that's exactly what could happen, as the Washington Commanders have already been willing to put up multiple first-round picks for Russell Wilson, and everybody knows that they want a quarterback. Everybody knows that they're desperate for a starting veteran quarterback that can win them football games and that has proven himself in the NFL, and Jared Goff fits that description perfectly. Now, while Jared Goff is no Russell Wilson, I still think the Lions can get at least a first-round pick out of Jared Goff, and it's actually been rumored, I don't know if it's fact yet, but it's been rumored that the Lions have put Jared Goff up for trade. Like, not that they're actively shopping him, but they're saying, if Washington wants to if Washington wants to offer up a trade, we need at least a first-round pick, if not more, to give away our starting quarterback a season from now. Obviously, the Lions, if they do trade away Jared Goff, wouldn't have a starting quarterback at this point. They'd have Tim Boyle, who's not a starter. So if they trade away Jared Goff, they're going to want some kind of assurance that they can get either a top quarterback in this year's class, or they can pick up a good veteran free agent, somebody like Marcus Mariota or Mitchell Trubisky, to kind of play out the season, not necessarily tank the season, but bring in a guy that has proven to win football games and bring in one of the higher end quarterback free agents for significantly less money than what Jared Goff is demanding. Now, honestly, I think the Lions could get a first round pick out of Jared Goff, possibly a 2023 first round pick, as I don't know if the Washington football team would be willing to give up a number 11 pick, a top 12 pick in this year's NFL draft for Jared Goff, because again, Jared Goff is no Russell Wilson. They're not going to give up multiple first round picks, and honestly, the first round pick is a little high for a player of Jared Goff's caliber, but that's where the Lions value their quarterback. They're saying, if you want a starting quarterback, if you want a guy that's going to go out and win you football games, if you want that true veteran quarterback that's been to a Super Bowl, that's been to championships, if you want a guy that can elevate your team and take you far and where you want to go to the promised land, to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to give up at least a first round pick, if not more, because Jared Goff is our starting quarterback. Now, I think to this point, it kind of tells everybody that the Lions aren't married to Jared Goff. It tells everybody that, okay, they like Jared Goff, they value him incredibly highly, but that he does have a price if the opposing team wants to trade for him. And honestly, if you're the Washington Commanders, I don't know if there's a better option out there than Jared Goff. I went through a lot of NFL teams kind of looking at, okay, who could be available this offseason, who could be on the trade block, who could be, in the trade market in order for Washington to make a play for them. And there's really only 3 quarterbacks that fit that description for me, as, I kind of cut the line at no team's going to trade their superstar quarterback unless their superstar quarterback is not happy with the team, right? They tried to trade for Russell Wilson, but Russell Wilson has no interest in leaving Seattle, and the Seahawks have no interest in parting ways with Russell Wilson, so that trade realistically was never going to go through, right? They called about Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes loves Kansas City. Kansas City loves Patrick Mahomes. They're not going to trade for that. Buffalo's not going to trade away Josh Allen. Baltimore is not going to trade away Lamar Jackson. No team is going to trade away a top 10 quarterback to the Washington Commanders for any amount of first round picks outside of maybe like an absurd number like the next 6-7 NFL drafts. You're going to get their first round pick. But, realistically, you're not going to trade for a top 10 quarterback. You're going to have to trade for a middle of the road, top 15, top 20 quarterback, but a guy that's a veteran and has proven that he can win you football games in the NFL. And really, that kind of boils down to 3 quarterbacks within reason for the Washington football team to trade for: Aaron Rodgers, Jimmy Garoppolo, or Jared Goff. Jared Goff, I think, is a top 3 candidate for the Washington Commanders to trade for. And honestly, if you're going to give up a first round pick, I would take Jared Goff over Jimmy Garoppolo. Jared Goff, I think, has shown the ability to actually lead his team to victories versus not being the reason that they lose. In Los Angeles, that was the big thing. It's like, okay, Jared Goff was never really the reason that they were winning. It was all Sean McVay. It was all, this guy or that guy. It was all Todd Gurley, all Aaron Donald, all Jalen Ramsey. But to be honest, in Detroit, Jared Goff made the difference in a lot of our games and a lot of our victories, right? We didn't win a game without Jared Goff. Tim Boyle was close in Atlanta, but eventually choked away the game. He was close in Cleveland, but eventually choked away the game. And if we had Jared Goff, those games are likely victories and put us at 5 wins on the season instead of 3. So Jared Goff has been the difference maker in Detroit, and we won games because of Jared Goff, right? It's not fair to say that, okay, he's the 100% sole reason that we won these football games, but he was definitely a big contributor and was the biggest reason why we went 3-3-1 in Jared Goff's in Jared Goff's last 7 starts and in the second half of Jared Goff's 2021 season. Jared Goff was a primary reason the Lions had victories in the NFL year, because in all the games that they won, Jared Goff played really well. He played great versus Arizona, played great versus Green Bay, played, really good for a majority of the game versus the Minnesota Vikings, outside of that one really bad interception late in the fourth quarter. But, he played really, really well, and he just complimented everybody on the Lions, didn't try to do too much, but took advantage of what the Lions had, took advantage of what the opposing defense was showing him, and put up points on the board and led the Lions to victories. You take a look at Washington's roster, right? You have Terry McLaurin, you have Curtis Samuel, you have a Sean Gibson, I believe is his name. Antonio Gibson, maybe? I don't remember. It's Gibson. I just don't know the first name. And, that really good offensive line with, I believe, Ricky Seals-Jones is the tight end, who's a pretty good deep threat, pretty good vertical threat in the NFL, right? You have a better surrounding cast for Jared Goff if you're the Washington Commanders, and you're going to say, okay, if Jared Goff with proper coaching in the second half of his season last year with nothing but Amon-Ra St. Brown and Josh Reynolds and sometimes TJ Hawkinson, but very rarely, if he could put up 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and have a 3-3-1 record with arguably the worst on-paper talent in the NFL, what can he do with a defense that hosts Chase Young and Landon Collins and, a couple really good members of that defense with a above-average offensive line, Curtis Samuel, Terry McLaurin, Antonio Gibson, and, whatever players we're going to draft in this year's class. Just give him weapon after weapon after weapon and let that team go to work. This was a team that, without a quarterback in 2019 or in 2020, made the NFL playoffs and won their division. Last year, Chase Young got hurt. Last year, they had a lot of injuries up front on that defensive line, and they just weren't the same team as 2020. But coming back as a healthy roster and adding Jared Goff, probably the best quarterback they've had since Kirk Cousins, or the best quarterback they would have had since Kirk Cousins, it makes a lot of sense for the Washington Commanders to want a guy that has proven his ability to lead a football team to victories. Now, if you're the Lions, you're going to want at least a first-round pick because you weren't expecting Jared Goff to be gone next season, right? Jared Goff is somebody that you have trust in, somebody that you've worked with over the last year. And Jared Goff, as for all intents and purposes, was your quarterback for at least another season, if not 2, 3, or 4, if not to even re-sign him further than that. Jared Goff goes from being your franchise quarterback for a couple of years to being officially on the trade block. You're not going to take anything less than a first-round pick for Jared Goff because you want assurance that you can get your Malik Willis. And if I'm the Lions, I'm not settling for anything less than that 11th overall pick, because that 11th overall pick, I think, is a prime opportunity to draft Malik Willis. I think that's right around where he's going to go in the NFL draft. I don't think Carolina takes a quarterback. I think they have a couple other issues that they got to work out before the quarterback situation, and I don't think they're going to take Malik Willis. And then after that, there's not really a team that's threatening for Malik Willis until number 11. So if you're the Lions and you trade away Jared Goff, I won't settle for anything other than that number 11 pick, and maybe that's shooting really high, but if they don't accept it, then you're left with Jared Goff, who's a solid quality starting quarterback in the NFL and is going to win you some football games next year. And if you do, you get your quarterback of the future in Malik Willis with top 5 quarterback potential and MVP type ceiling. Now you may be saying, okay, well, logistically this wouldn't work out because of cap space and because of, contract negotiations and stuff like that. And while it's true that the Washington football team would have to take on a large majority of Jared Goff's contract, if they somehow work out a deal to give the Lions the draft pick in April and only trade Jared Goff after June 1st, then they could essentially do it. And I don't know how this would work out, but I know that there is a way that either Washington could pay the salary for Jared Goff, they could pay that dead cap, which would be a lot, but they could pay that dead cap, or they can just wait until the post-June June 1st guy, or they can just wait till the post June 1st, and then, you can make that trade. You can do something logistically. I don't know exactly the inner workings of how this trade would work, but I'm telling you it could work financially if the trade took place after June 1st, where Jared Goff's dead cap would only cost $5 million, and he would actually free up $26.1 million and save that for the Lions, giving them a huge amount of money to go spend on rookies, go spend on free agents, and maybe even make a trade of their own with those 3 first-round picks. So with that being said, it's a very possible trade scenario. As unrealistic as this might sound as you entered the video and as you clicked on the thumbnail, this trade could happen. This trade is not out of this world. There's really only 3 quarterbacks out there right now that I think are really on the trade market, right? It's Jimmy Garoppolo, who I think has shown significantly less ability to lead a team to victory than Jared Goff, as far as like actually carrying a team on his back, being the sole reason that that team wins. I think Jared Goff has shown the ability to lead a team and be the driving force towards wins more so than Jimmy Garoppolo. And Aaron Rodgers, I think, is just going to cost too much money. I don't think the Packers want to trade him away. He's asking for nearly $50 million a year, and it would cost you likely multiple first-round picks for a guy that might not even play in 2 years, might not even be playing in 3 seasons. And while that might sound great and that might give the Washington Commanders an opportunity to win a Super Bowl right now as early as next season, I think Jared Goff is a better long-term option. I think he's the perfect balance of those 3 to give you the best opportunity to win now, but also give you the best opportunity to have a long-term plan at quarterback and have a guy that can take you far into the playoffs year after year after year, opposed to maybe just a 1-year run with a higher floor and, of course, maybe a little bit higher ceiling when you have Aaron Rodgers. So with all that being said, that is it for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments, what would you think about this trade? If the Lions were to give away Jared Goff, what kind of value would you expect in return, and what kind of value would you want out of the starting quarterback? Personally, if I'm the Lions, I'm not taking anything less than a first-round pick. And if I want to be really stingy, I'm not taking anything less than that 11th overall pick, practically guaranteeing myself Malik Willis, or at the very least, one of the top quarterback prospects in this year's class. So with all that being said, that is it for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching. Again, let me know down in the comments below what you think about this trading scenario, and let me know down in the comments below whether or not you would trade away Jared Goff. With all that being said, that is it for you guys today. Thank you all so very much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions!